two things. I'm going to call on 5 people at a time, as I did at the last session, last 2 sessions, because it moved along rather efficiently. Everyone said that. And remember that your time is at 3 minutes for each speaker because of the number of people that wish to speak. So this is the order that people signed up, and I will call on them in that order. And then Mrs. Bartholomew will have to change the clock to the 3 minutes from 5 to 3. Okay, these 5 people, please line up in this order. Jack Witt, Chris Quayle, Ed Spellers, John Lavender, John Witt. And then as we get to the 5th person, I'll call on the next 5. Okay, good evening.
Good evening. Madam Mayor and council members, I think the plot to create hysteria to support, I guess you have to do the math, but it's something like a 25% millage increase has now been uncovered. I understand the plot was the work of the city manager and the mayor, but I am confident that a majority of the council members are not party to this. The fact is that that 25 or 23 or 27, I've heard those numbers, percent increase, it's easy to do, I just need a calculator, is truly outrageous. And that's particularly the case given that this organization, meaning the city as led by the council and designated to the city manager, has not worked on many of its cost issues. In fact, Councilman Fleming, I think, said it best at a recent meeting when he said, "You're making good progress. I think you need to continue to work on it." And I'm just going to point out 3 issues with my background in HR and employment law and employee benefit plans that might be helpful. Now, I'm not suggesting these are where you should focus exclusively or even primarily, but they're examples where there's opportunities. In the case of the pension plan, 2 of the employee groups have a benefit calculation which includes a factor of 2.8%. That's one of the highest I've ever seen. In fact, it is the highest I've ever seen under this kind of a pension formula. To put it in perspective, most of the teacher pension benefit formulas use a 1.5% times final average pay times years of service. So this benefit is essentially controlling for length of service and rate of pay is 87% higher than teachers. And of course, teachers are often criticized for the benefits they receive. The second I'll point out is the defined contribution plan. I think it is admirable that you've moved to a defined contribution for new hires because that's easier to control. Incidentally, this is not the only entity that has done that, despite what the city manager said. I negotiated that with 19 bargaining units in Genesee County. But 10% is very high. In fact, it's unheard of in the private sector. And I can tell you, having been responsible for benefits for 3 Fortune 500 sized companies, that the average contribution is 3% in the private sector. 50% of the first 6%. The typical contribution presently is 0, by the way. So this is something that can be worked on. Finally, in the case of health care benefits, I understand the average contribution required by the participants is $85 a month. I can show you data that shows that the average in the overall economy is $183 a month, so you're not halfway there. Again, you're making progress. I know you have an excellent HR director, and these may not be the areas that you want to focus on. There's other areas to address costs and expenses.
Okay,
so I would suggest you keep working on those items, and in light of that, I think any suggestion of a millage increase, let alone one of above 25%, is truly absurd.
Thank you. The next speaker, please. Please give us your name. I know it's Kathy Quayle, but...
I am Chris Quayle, a
Chris
Troy resident of 8 years. Mayor and members of the council, my husband and I invested a large portion of our retirement nest egg in buying our home in Troy, thinking of it as the last single home purchase of our lives. We felt confident that in Troy, a city of many citizen-friendly facilities and excellent law enforcement, our investment was sound. I learned in the last Troy City Council meeting that our home values in Troy now may not go back up to pre-recession rates until perhaps the year 2020. I believe that if the city closes down the assets of its museum, community center, library, nature center, and further reduces its police force, our home will never regain the real estate value it had pre-recession. Please allow the citizens of Troy the chance to vote for a 1.9 millage increase. Thank you, and I understand the estimated cost of the special election is less than $1 per resident. I have my dollar here.
Thank you. Please give us your name.
My name is Edmund Spillers. I'm a resident and a business owner in the city of Troy. Want to thank once again for the opportunity to stand in front of the city council. It's now time for you as a council to deliver the people of this city the opportunity to voice an overwhelming, which is, you've already documented, Mayor, an overwhelming majority of them have requested that you approve a ballot proposal to invest in our city and sustain our communities and protect our families and reset the atmosphere for a return to Troy's proud reputation of being open for business and business owners. If we do not act now, we stand to lose a lot. Our reputation as the most livable and safest city. But I contend we stand to lose a little more. Sensibility. The ability to put aside any ideological differences and see what this moment is really about. That's the people of this city. What is negligent is the notion that government is bent on ruining and our ability to live our lives and grow our businesses and families. The taxes and millages and investments that represent the hundreds of neighbors and friends who go to work for this city every day to protect your families and quality of life. When you fight investment, when you fight taxes, for situations as this moment calls for, you are sending a message that your quality of life for everyone is expendable. Simply making closures, relying on privatization and or consolidation and throwing more people into the unemployment rolls is reckless and wrong. That's why this council must make the clear choice and approve the ballot proposal for a general operational fund millage. Let's save our Troy. There's no surplus to rely on. There's no sitting around, there's no money just sitting around to save the city. Given the tax savings mentioned for 2010 and along, all this millage is asking for is $42 a year from each and every person. Just $42. That's going to Chili's. That's going to a movie. We can all sacrifice that just so our city stays the same, so that we can continue to have the quality of life and the protection from our city and fire. So I deeply urge the city council to approve the ballot proposal for the millage increase. Thank you.
The next speaker, yes, Mr. Lavender.
Good evening, Mayor and members of City Council. I'm John Lavender, a Troy resident and homeowner. I feel very strongly that even in the face of a severe financial challenge, we need to do what we can to preserve much of the nature and spirit of Troy that form the basis of why we enjoy living here, including full-service police and fire protection, and including the quality of life facilities that are being considered for radical reductions or closing. Reasons why have been presented by me and others, and I won't go through that list again tonight. What I will say is that the City Council has a decision to make, and hopefully the residents of Troy have a decision to make. I ask you, the City Council, to make the decision to place a time-limited city tax millage increase on a ballot. The effect of such an increase will be offset to a great extent over the next several years, and for most completely, by falling taxes due to lower property values. I believe that whether or not to increase the property tax millage to preserve city services is a decision you should allow the residents of Troy to make. There has been and will be some discussion on the amount of an increase to seek, but based on the information provided by city management, I think city services should be preserved to the extent made possible by a 1.9 mil increase, the most permissible under current city charter in a February 2010 special election. Accordingly, I support the resolution on tonight's agenda proposed by Mayor Schilling. Once an election is scheduled, the residents of Troy will have their decision to make. I hope the residents will study the issue carefully and make an informed decision to preserve the values of Troy. Thank you.
Thank you. John, before you speak, let me call the next 5 people. Thank you. Kathy Puccineri, excuse me, yes. Gordon Shepke, Gerald Steiger, Terry Roberts, and Barbara Klein. Would those people please come in line next? Thank you. Yes, John.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is John Witt, and my presentation tonight is entitled, Does Troy Really Need a Tax Increase? I will address this question through a simple and straightforward analysis of the city's revenues and expenditures. Now, unfortunately, too much of the tax increase debate over the last month has been driven by emotion and irrationality, not facts. Tonight, I will present to the residents of Troy the facts on whether we truly need a tax increase. Now, on the second page of the yellow handout that I just presented to the council and many in the audience have,
Excuse me, Mayor.
Yes.
Are there more copies? There are not enough for council.
there should be.
I have one for Councilman Howard. I need one for Councilman Howard. And I'll need one too.
I'll give him mine and then get it out. Continue.
Thank you.
Now, we can share.
Okay. Great. Okay. On the second page of the handout, you will see the projected city deficit over the next 6 fiscal years, along with the revenue that would be generated by the proposed 29% tax increase. As you can see, this tax increase would generate $37.6 million of revenue over the next 6 years, while the budget deficit over those same 6 years is only $22.6 million. Thus, the proposed 29% tax increase will provide the city with $15 million more than needed to cover the budget deficit. This statistic alone establishes that the proposed 29% tax increase is irresponsible and unjustifiable. The next question, though, is, do we need a tax increase at all? Now, on the third page of your handout, it shows 9 reasonable adjustments to the budget that will allow the city to close the budget deficit over the next 6 years. These budget adjustments, which maintain the city's fund balance at 15% of the general fund, include reclaiming money currently in several reserves funds, such as the Brownfield redevelopment, the Transit Center, the Civic Center, and Trails. The money from these funds alone provides the city $5.2 million. Additional adjustments would include the privatization and leasing of Sanctuary Lake Golf Course, department consolidation and a hiring freeze, and a 5% across-the-board wage and benefit reduction. Now, we are already on our way to achieving this wage and benefit reduction, as one city employee union has agreed to the reduction and 3 other city employee unions have agreed to negotiate about this reduction. This ongoing negotiation effort is another reason why this current rush for a tax increase makes absolutely no sense. These adjustments total nearly $20 million of additional savings over the next 6 years. Now, as you can see on the fourth page of the handout, these budget adjustments will not only completely eliminate the city's budget deficit over the next 6 years, but they will actually provide the city with a surplus of over $3 million. Please note that none of these adjustments include closing any city facilities or the layoffs of any police officers or firefighters or any other city employees. This proves that there are ways to balance the city budget without a tax increase other than the infamous and outlandish Option 1 and Option 2 presented by Mr. Zerlag. Thus, I return to the all-important question. Does Troy really need a tax increase? As you have learned from the statistics that I have explained over the last few minutes, the answer is clearly no. This proposed tax increase will only unnecessarily increase the burden on our already suffering residents and businesses. In conclusion, this proposed 29% tax increase is rash, unwarranted, and unnecessary, and it should be soundly rejected this evening. Thank you.
Next speaker, please. Folks, at the last 2 times when we had the room filled as much as this, we asked people to please not clap. If you agree with the speaker, smile. If you don't agree, frown. It worked great, and we got through 70 people that spoke at that one meeting, and there aren't 70 here tonight. So please, I know you feel strongly about this, but hold your applause. Thank you. Yes, go
My
ahead.
name's Kathy Fusenary. Last I spoke, I mentioned that my husband and I shopped for a community where we could raise a family and have a solid investment financially. I talked about the quality of life in Troy. I'd now like to talk about why we left our previous community. We were living in a nice Italian neighborhood on the east side of Detroit. The houses were well kept, the lawns were manicured, and the alleys were clean. Initially, we looked at some homes in the area since they were very affordable. However, we noticed some frightening trends. Speculators were buying homes that became available as older residents moved away. Those homes were rented out and maintenance began to decline. People began to fear losing their investment and fled to the suburbs. Home values plummeted, tax revenues declined, services declined, and the downward spiral continues. We've heard from many residents that if the quality of life is not maintained here in Troy, there would not be a reason to stay in the community. We chose Troy when it was a new city, building a community together with the quality of life we all wanted for our families, provided the basis for a sound financial investment. Now our next generation aspires to raise their families in Troy. There were comments at the last meeting regarding public safety services being critical and quality of life being extra. Public safety is critical. So is quality of life. So is our school system. All of these amenities we have here in Troy contribute to the fabric of this community. Using other city funds to cover the shortfall in the near term so that a special election would not be necessary is financially irresponsible. It doesn't fix the problem, it postpones it, and increasing our debt, putting our bond rating at risk. Postponing an election until after February, as you pointed out, there wouldn't be any increased revenue until August of 2011. By that time, the human element supporting the government in the city of Troy would be irreparably damaged. Last year, a proposal was passed to restrict millage increases without community approval. It did not endorse City Council to prevent the community from voicing their opinion. Overwhelmingly, people have stepped up to this podium and asked you to put this to a vote. Reluctance strikes me as paternalistic. I repeat, I'm asking each of you to stand up and do what's right for our community. Our family of 3 voters will support a 1.9 mil increase that would retain these desired services. We'll do this by voting for it when it comes up for voter approval, by voting in November and in the future only for those council candidates who support such a revenue increase, and by encouraging our friends, our neighbors, and our colleagues to do the same. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker, please.
Yes, my name is Gordon Shepke. Live on Paragona, Troy. Been here 38 years. There's have a lot of concerns, Mayor and Council, about this tax hike. I applaud the city for having a lower tax revenue than the surrounding communities, and I think we should celebrate it and not trash it. One of the things that concerns me is I received a call today from the Troy Historical Society, and before that previously a newsletter saying that if the people didn't come down here and basically support the tax increase, that they were going to be shut down, and that really bothers me. I wonder how many other organizations in the city have sent out similar propaganda or whatever, giving a one-sided argument as why this thing should be voted on. It really bothers me to have my tax dollars spent on one-sided propaganda or a one-sided opinion by an organization in the city when, first of all, we don't even know. I think that every possible way should be tried before you go to the voters for a tax increase. Right now, there's a lot of heartache out there, and the federal government, the state, and the county, everybody's got shortfalls, and people are going to be coming back on the taxpayers for additional revenues, and so this is just going to be one of many that's going to be coming down the pike. I think we need to look real hard on this thing. When the Shepke family has a problem, an income problem, our family has to make hard decisions to adjust to the new realities and tighten our belts, and I think the city has to do a little bit of that too. I'm not saying lay off police officers and close these beautiful facilities we have, because I really don't think that that really has to be done. But we have to look, we have to be really financially responsible, and we don't want to go out and boost taxes 23, 29%. I've heard a lot of numbers, but when there's been no serious effort by our city manager to even try any of the other workable alternatives, they're out there. And another thing, many present on this council who have always voted in this city to cut out needless speculative debt, and they're being kind of demonized as evil people, trying to close our library, historical society, community center, and slash a lot of the budgets with the police department. At least that's according to John Zerleg's Plan 1 and 2 of gloom and doom. And I don't think these things are necessarily have to happen. And thank you very much.
Thank you. The next speaker, please. Give us your name.
Mayor,
Yes.
Shelley, Council. My name's Terry Roberts. I've been a resident of Troy for 43 years. I've owned a Troy business for 29 years. And I don't know where we come up with the $1 or $2 that it's going to cost us. I paid last year in property taxes $35,525. And of that, $7,597 was for the city of Troy. Assuming that we have a 20% or approximate 20% increase, my tax increase will be $1,520 for the city of Troy. Then of course the schools are going to move in because they're being shortchanged also. So there's another $2,792. And then of course our governor is going to step in. And she's going to want probably around $4 grand on single business taxes and additional fees. And then the government is going to step in. All total, with the government coming up with about $8 grand, my tax increase is going to be something in the neighborhood of $16,312. And I can't afford that. My business can't afford that. So what I would like to do, I got 4 men laid off right now. I got 2 men working 32 hours because business is so bad. I have to tighten my belt. The 2 men that I have families. So if this tax increase goes through, I might ask one of you folks to come down to my place of business and lay off one of the men. So I'll have 1 man left. I don't know whether you'd be receptive to that or not, but that's about the way it's going to have to go. I don't think we need a tax increase. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. The next speaker, please.
Hi, I'm Gerard Steger, Madam Mayor, not Gerald, just to make that clear. And I'm a Troy resident. Madam Mayor, members of the City Council, and fellow Troy residents, we learn important lessons. First, as children in life, we learn haste makes waste. Then as adults, we continue to learn important lessons, such as due diligence and to be responsible for what you do. We've had, at the last 2 City Council meetings, 112 slides, PowerPoint slides thrown at us. It's tough to get confused and to get worried and panicked until you wade through the numbers. A lot of terms are thrown around we don't recognize, like CVT, O&M cost. Half the time they weren't even defined in those presentations. But as was referred to in that yellow handout, I took a look at the yellow handout, and the first number, the deficit numbers, are from slide number 9 on September 28th. And then the second column of numbers, requested tax increase, you'd find that on slide number 65 multiplied by 1.9. We had to get through 50 or 60 slides to get from the problem to the tax increase, but when you add it up, according to the presentations, you have a 1.9 mil tax increase, you've got $15 million too much. Haste makes waste. We need to have due diligence. We need to be careful before we have any tax increase. The worst thing you can do is have a tax increase. And as pointed out, it's about as much as 29%. If we don't need to do it, let's not do it if we don't need to do it now. We were told in the presentations that to have a special election in February, the time frame was October 19th. But you and the city council are pretty shrewd. You asked questions and found out it's December 15th, not October 19th. Those presentations were hasty, and haste made waste, and we need due diligence. We found out, too, that the 2 mil election suggested would violate the city charter, and you would need to amend the city charter, have it go to the city charter commission, go to the city attorney, and that was never brought up in the presentation. Again, it was an example where haste made waste, and we need to have due diligence before we can even consider a tax increase. We were told that we cannot determine the cost savings of privatization, wage concessions, or other savings. And that's a fair answer. We can't because we haven't gotten into it yet. But we were told that not 1 mil, not 1.5 mils, but 2 mils would fix the problem. Well, how can we know how much revenue we need if we don't know what expenses we need? Again, it's an example of haste makes waste, and we need due diligence. We are told that an ideal fund balance is from 10 to 17%, but one of the slides showed the fund balance going up to 21% while suggesting budget cuts and the property tax increased. Haste makes waste, and we need to have due diligence. It would cost $125,000 or tens of thousands of dollars to have an election in February. That money would be gone in one day. I'd rather see that money keep a police officer employed than spend on a special election. The last thing we need to have is a special election. We need to perform due diligence, keep asking questions that was brought up before, and please don't put through a property tax increase. We don't need it. Thanks.
Thank you. Before the next speaker, I'll call the next 5 names, please, before Barbara Klein speaks. Linda Theofold, Thomas Peltier, Tony Cruz, Patty Corner, and Allison Eisman. Would those folks please come up in that order?
I'm looking at the back part of me. It's not exciting. The last time I was here, I was
Linda,
excited.
Excuse me just a sec. Would you move up so that the next, yeah, thank you. Go ahead.
The last time I was here, I said my name was Barbara Picken Klein. I was quoted as saying picket. I was a Detroit teacher. We picketed all the time. But I am Picken. T. Boone Pickens is a distant, very distant relative. He doesn't even know of my existence, and I don't really know him very well. However, it was fun to find it out. I call him a man of La Mancha into windmills. My mother raised me believing that nothing is sure except death and taxes. And I have been in Troy. It's been my life for 33 years. I call it Camelot. I know because I was a Detroit teacher for 32 years that the libraries are closed in Detroit. I know that what this does to the children in Detroit. The library, when somebody picked on my library, that's when you found me at the meetings. I know how important the Alexandria Library was. I don't know what happened because of its burning, but I know close a library, close a child, and the intelligence growing in a community. I am grateful that Troy has been what it's been in my lifetime. I would like to see it endure for the lifetime of the many, many children who are growing up in this area. Thank you, all of you, for who you are and what you do. Troy is one of the most able communities in this world. I think sometimes people lose sight of that. Oakland County is one of the greatest counties, and I call it Oakland Country. I don't know if we really know who we are, but I am so impressed with the brilliance of the people in the audience and the brilliance of the people running this show. Thank you.
Thank you. Linda Theofold? Good evening.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Thank you for this opportunity to address you. Before my minutes start clicking away, I do owe you all an apology. It was my wild outburst when the snowplow truck drivers were getting their award. I'm looking forward to another mailbox, surviving another winter. So I had to give them kudos because they do a great job. When I learned this item was on the agenda, I emailed a notice about the meeting tonight to some in my subdivision. And I got back several responses. One of them really struck me, and I want to share it with you tonight. This is from the president of our homeowners association, Covington Ridge. And he wrote, I don't understand the tax increase. Are they functioning in the real world of 2009? I work for the 9th largest corporation on the Fortune 500 list, and we have cut pay between 5 and 40%. We've eliminated pension contributions, and we are paying more for our health insurance premiums every year. The employees will need to have salaries, pensions, and health benefits adjusted to the new declining tax base. The existing municipal process of annual salary increases, pension, and health insurance, which was modeled after the Big Three, is old school and unsustainable. The city must adjust their financial models to the new declining revenue tax base. My position is no new tax increases. I second that. However, recently I read a quote by Senator John Papageorge where he was commenting on the state of Michigan revenue situation. Senator Papageorge said that Michigan has the highest unemployment in the nation and high taxes that keep providers away and drive out hopeless families. It is time for the state to operate within its means, just like its residents. State government must do more with less. We cannot continue to balance the state budget on the backs of Michigan taxpayers. I think it would be totally appropriate to replace the word state in his quote with City of Troy. A 29% tax increase, although it sounds palatable at the $100 or $200 or whatever the amount is that's been bandied about lately, is unconscionable in this day and age. 29%, 23%, whatever the actual number turns out to be, until you have done your homework, until you have cut every single possible place you can. And if that means pensions, and employees being asked to pay for more for health care, I'm sure all of them would step up to the plate to keep their job. I think for too long, politicians have felt that the well would never run dry, especially if you play the it's for the kids or it's the library or the police fire card. Obviously, those in city management have missed the many tea parties in Troy. You have no idea how mad people are over this and how upset we are that politicians, both local and federal, have been wasting our money for years. My question for those in Troy is who was minding the store? Who was looking at the housing hits we were all taking and connecting the dots as to what this would mean for tax revenue? This is not new just this year. It was brought before council a few years ago to have an employee raise, and just the very next year you laid off employees for an amount of money that was equal to that raise. Sadly, the solution to any problem for many in government is more taxes. I want leadership, forward thinking, and solutions to the problems we all face, not just another spend and tax politician. Until then, I remain taxed enough already. Thank you.
The next speaker, please.
Good evening, Mayor, City Council, staff. My name is Tony Cruz. I've been a Troy resident for just over 16 years, and I'm here to voice my deep disappointment in certain members of our city's governance who are seeking excuses to raise our property taxes. Specifically, I'm disappointed in Mr. Zerlag for piggybacking essential services such as police protection with non-essential services such as the Nature Center, museum, and public library. I'm disappointed with members of City Council who've been less than energetic in placing Mr. Zerlag's feet to the fire and demanding a more creative approach to thrift over the next 6 years. The issue should not be framed in terms of how many essential services we'll lose if taxes are not raised. Rather, the issue is how much largesse can you cut from our current budget, and if anything, lower our taxes so we can start climbing out of the current economic quagmire. Finally, I'm disappointed in you, Mayor Schilling. The proverbial buck is supposed to stop at your desk. You appear to profess support for a democratic system when you propose that voters make a decision on whether or not they're paying sufficient property taxes. However, a person in your position should be amply aware that a significant proportion of your constituency lacks the energy to question Mr. Zerlag's proposals. Said differently, you're allowing our city manager to mislead many voters into believing their only choice is to allow council to raise their taxes or else their safety is in jeopardy. And this mafia-like attempt to purchase the people's trust requires a level of arrogance I find stunning. To add insult to injury, you're allowing the less informed voters to remain unaware of that the actual cost of such an election is typically well over $100,000. To put it differently, you're supporting the waste of tens of thousands of dollars of our money so we can determine, using flawed information, if we need to be taxed even more. To his credit, Mr. Zerlag wisely looks ahead and is seeking a better understanding of where our city will be financially in the ensuing years. He needs, however, to extend his wisdom to a better understanding of the external and internal factors that got us here in the first place. For example, our cities aren't the only entities suffering from this diminishing revenue. The taxpayers have been among the first casualties of our current economy. Their employers aren't faring well, so your constituency isn't faring well. Many of us have therefore given up that extra car, a cottage, lofty college aspirations for our youngsters, etc. Why do our bodies of civic governance at all levels behave as if they're above making commensurate sacrifices when their public benefactors are dying financially? The truth is, our city has for years boasted of luxuries it couldn't afford. A recent example is our nature center. Deer have been time and again leaving the center and invading local subdivisions on both sides of Coolidge Highway, creating a safety hazard for residents and drivers alike. When I called the police regarding this, the best I could get from the dispatch officer was a non-working number to the Michigan Department of Natural Resources. We don't deal with animals, large animals, unless someone is hurt, said she. I dare say if it was one of our animals, animal control would take control, but somehow when it's something under Troy's control, there is no control.
Mr. Cruz, you're going to have to wrap it up because we're doing
Okay.
3 minutes.
I'm extracting an article from my hip pocket that's familiar to all of you, particularly when it belongs to someone else. And please listen carefully to the sound you're about to hear, because it's a report that should haunt you for the next 6 years. That, ladies and gentlemen, was the sound of my wallet snapping shut. I'm sure I speak for an overwhelming number of people in these chambers as well as the voting population when I declare to you our wallets are closed. I expect